What's up YouTube, Del here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you my first place Regenesis Kashtira deck profile. Now this list isn't anything crazy special, but it is the first version of Regenesis that I am bringing you. I really do like the Regenesis art type, what it can kind of provide and what it can do on its own. And then when you add the Kashtiras in it, which is arguably the most competitive and most supportive engine for the Regenesis, it does allow you to get that next level up. Now the matchups I was able to face today were two lots of blue eyes, one being pure, one with primites, then of course Yugioh as well. So it was a nice little baseline test for the deck, and it did do very, very well. It was very, very powerful, very, very aggressive, and it also had a very nice defensive option to it as well. I'm going to take you through the list. I'll also show you the side that I went with. I'll explain some of my choices, cards I know that I'm already going to change, cards of why they were included in the list and everything else in between to give you as much information as possible. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Starting off with the Regenesis cards, we are on Triple Archfiend. Now this is your ideal go-to for the Regenesis because this one on summon, normal or special, allows you to search you out another Regenesis. It is also one of the only Regenesis ones that allows it to be special summoned from the hand by revealing a monster with 2500 attack or defense. The other Regenesis monsters, apart from Regenesis Lord, summon themselves to the field if there is a monster with 2500 attack or defense on the field. All of these have the exact same effect again, except Lord, that during your opponent's end phase, if it's in the graveyard because it was sent there that turn, it returns from the graveyard back to the hand. Which is quite useful when you look at Sage, Warrior and Dragon, because they're all going to be cards that tribute either themselves or another Regenesis, put them into the graveyard and then allows you to proceed with an additional effect, whether that be destroy a spell or trap, return a monster to the hand, or of course negate a card effect. We are on one Regenesis Lord. This is like your main boss monster for the deck. Ideally what you want to be doing is you're going to want to go for your Archfiend. Search out your Sage as your first port of call. If you already have access to Sage, you can work your way into Lord. And Lord is going to be your aggressor as well as your direct option to get you either into your Regenesis Code, Regenesis, or of course Regenesis Birth. So Lord can only be special summoned, and it must be special summoned from the hand by banishing a face-up monster you control with 2500 original attack and defense, which is going to be any of your Regenesis monsters. But remember, Archfiend is pretty much your fodder. After it's used its effect to search, that's the one you want to get to the graveyard. Then this one is, if it's special summon specifically, you get to set a Regenesis spell or trap from the deck, and it gains 2500 attack during the battle phase only. If it attacks a defensive monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. And keep in mind, it can't be normal summoned or set as well, which is why it's like semi-specific. But it is your game ender because this one just gets 5k or becomes 5k during the battle phase. This plus then anything else that you might be able to add up to 3k. Or if you start to consider your Kashtira Kashtira field spell, Planet Rice off, you can then buff all of your monsters, and that could be enough to kind of swing the game through just 2 monster attacks. Sage is the Omni Negate, so if a monster with 2500 original attack or defense is on the field, you get to special summon it from the hand, and then you get a quick effect when your opponent activates a card or effect to then tribute one other, or send technically, one other Regenesis card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, negate the activation if you do destroy it. During your opponent's end phase, if this is in the graveyard because it was there this turn, you get to add it back to the hand. Warrior, exact same as Sage. It can summon itself if there is a monster with 2500 attack or defense on the field. It has a quick effect to tribute this card to then target a monster your opponent controls and return it to the hand. And the last Regenesis monster we are playing is the Regenesis Dragon. Again, exact same as Sage and Warrior. Summon itself if there is a monster on the field with 2500 attack or defense. And then it has a quick effect to tribute this card to then target a spell or trap your opponent controls and destroys it. So straight away, these two cards are actually really, really good in the Blue Eyes matchup, and so is Sage, can be very, very helpful. And these all put in work in that particular match. We've then got 3 Regenesis Code. I actually really, really like this card, and I actually started to respect Draw and Lockbird in this build a lot more for the pure fact that, yes, of course, if you do activate Regenesis Code during the draw phase and you do end up summoning off your Regenesis Archfiend, if you're not able to clear the field or you don't hard open your Kashtira Birth, it will shut off your access to your Kashtira cards. But the idea is that you can risk it by going draw phase, activate your Regenesis Code, summon out your Archfiend. Archfiend on summon would search you out your Sage. And that means the first search you do in the main phase, or just after the draw phase when the Draw and Lockbird can then affect you, is when you're going to be able to go, okay, cool, summon down the Sage, and if you are worried about draw because you want to do a lot of searching, you can stop it. But more times than not, it's basically in there to give you access to a Regenesis monster, mainly being your Archfiend, and that just gives you that Omni Negate before you start to commit too far, and this will obviously bait out a hand trap. So if your opponent does interact with this, whether it be an Ash, whether it be a Furos in return, it then means you know what you need to play around. It does lock you out of the extra until the end of the next turn, but it also has another beneficial effect that during the main phase, if it's in the graveyard except the turn it was sent there, you get to banish it to target one of your banished Regenesis monsters and special summon it. Now I actually found that particular effect a little bit more awkward to try and resolve. And the only times that I got to resolve it was if I banished a Regenesis monster off my Lord, or if I banished a Regenesis monster because my opponent hit it with the Drill Beam. And that's kind of where I got the most use out of it. It's not as it probably could have been in the past, where you could dump something like, or activate something like a Dimension Shifter. And I feel that this deck could very easily be a Dimension Shifter style deck, because you wouldn't mind losing the graveyard effect of Code or the graveyard effect of Regenesis or anything else like that. It actually kind of put in a lot of work. I'm happy that it's not that case. I'm actually quite happy with the way this does work, because there are ways that you can banish your own cards, and that's when you can start getting more use out of the graveyard effect of your Regenesis Code. We then have free Regenesis. So this lets you take a Regenesis monster from the deck and either add it to the hand or send it to the graveyard. If you control a Regenesis monster, you get to add a monster with 2500 attack or defense. 2500 attack and defense from your deck to the hand instead. If this card is in the graveyard except the turn the card it was sent there, you get to banish it to target a Regenesis monster in your graveyard and special summon it. You can only use each effect once per turn. So obviously this is a better one than Code for that scenario, but the quick effect or activation of Code is still very, very important. The final Regenesis card is Birth. I actually really do like this card. So as cost, you send a Regenesis monster from your deck to the graveyard to then target a face-down monster your opponent controls. Afterwards, you get to change it to face-down defense position. During your opponent's turn, you get to send this card to the graveyard to then special summon as many Regenesis monsters as possible with different names from the hand, grave, and or banishment, but send them to the grave during the end phase, which is absolutely fine, because when you send them to the end phase, as long as it's during your opponent's turn, which obviously the second effect of this one is only during their turn, you get to add all those Regenesis back to the hand. The only downside is you can only use one effect per turn, so you either use the Book of Moon effect or you use the effect to kind of reborn all of your Regenesis. One other note that I should make about the Code as well is that the Code will send the monster that you summon off of it to the graveyard during your opponent's end phase, which is absolutely fine, because the idea is if you're going to be using this during your turn, you're going to be able to have that monster on the field during your opponent's turn, and you usually want to make sure that it's used as its tribute fodder, or it is used as tribute fodder for like something like a Sage. And then during the end phase, even if it gets sent, because it got sent during your opponent's turn, you get to just add it back to the hand. So then the Kashtira card. So we'll start off with the card that has the most synergy with this deck, and that is of course the Unicorn, because it does have 2500 attack. The benefit off of the back of something like a Unicorn is it will give you direct access to a Kashtira Furiosis and of course a Kashtira Birth. Playing ones of these is all you need. Remember that Birth lets you normal summon a level 7 monster without tribute, and what you do need to keep in mind with the Regenesis is that you have 7s and 8s. So your Archfiend is an 8, your Sage is a 7, your Dragon is an 8, your Warrior is a 7. So they've got a nice balance at this moment in time, and then the Lord, I believe, is like a 10. Let me just double confirm on Lord. So Lord is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, Lord is a 10. So. But that's kind of where Birth can come into play and put a bit of work in for you, not to mention the fact that you can link off your Kashtiras or overlay them, detach them as materials, and then bring one of them back with Birth. Theosis, what I really like about this, and this is one of the first cards I'm going to want to change, is I am playing free Kashtira Fenrir. Now, this is obviously great because the idea is you'd go Theosis, target Unicorn, summon out Fenrir. Fenrir can then search out a Unicorn, and the benefit of something like Unicorn is it is 2500 attack, so you reveal it for your Regenesis Archfiend, and then that allows you to get your Regenesis Archfiend to the field. It is the greedy route, because it's the route that won't allow you to play through Droll, because you'll have to go special summon down Unicorn. And what I found myself doing more times than not is I would special summon down Unicorn, but I wouldn't use this effect yet. I would then go into my Regenesis cards and prioritize getting access to a Regenesis Sage or just a search over the back of the Regenesis Archfiend. And then if I don't get hit with Droll, I'll use the Unicorn to then search for a Fenrir and then push on further through there. If you do get hit with a Droll, there are still ways to play around it, but at least if you have Unicorn on the field, you get the first look at your opponent's extra deck, and then they're probably going to be activating a monster effect during their turn, and you get a second look as well. So it allows you to get rid of those cards that people are playing 2-ofs, it allows you to get rid of cards that people are playing 1-ofs, whatever you feel is going to be more threatening for you. So of course we do play triple Kashtira Fenrir. 100% of the time I was using Fenrir to search out a second version of Unicorn, because then either that Unicorn could be the additional normal summon if I hard open up, well not the additional normal summon, but the normal summon if I hard open up Birth. It could also be a route. So the one thing I would want to kind of consider or change is maybe take out Fenrir for one of the Scareclaw cache. And the reason I'd want to do something like that, or maybe even the Telements cache, is just to have that additional extender that can summon to the field that can then push through for more damage. Now I'm actually going to just quickly check something. I don't believe it is, but is Kashtira is Kashtira Tillman. I can't remember its stats. I don't think its stats are correct. I don't think it has 2500, but I could be wrong. No, 23 and 12. So the stats point isn't relevant, but the idea behind that is either you go for Tearlament Cash or you could add Tearlament Cash to this and add in the Scareclaw Cash. It just gives you that extra push that you might need. There was like one duel where I found myself putting 7500 damage on the field, but that's because I had to play through a Hieratic Seals, a Blue Eyes that they had summoned in defense, so I had to kill that and I could only get 7500 through worth of damage. But I feel like something like a Tearlament Cash or a Tearlament Cash or a Scareclaw Cash could be quite useful. Probably more so the Tearlament Cash, because that mill free could actually be quite useful, because if you do end up putting in a if you put a Tearlament in the graveyard, or not a Tearlament, sorry, a Regenesis in the graveyard or a Kashtira in the graveyard, there might be ways where Birth can actually help you extend that a little bit further without needing to go too deep into it. But that's something I'll look into and consider. I do like the idea behind it, but that's something to kind of keep in mind. Then 3 Planet Write-Off. Now the reason we're playing 3 of this and not 2 in a Terraforming is you do have to respect draw with this deck, which is what I was prioritising going into this, as I feel a lot of decks are going to be main decking draw on Lockbird, so that's something you do need to be very, very cautious of. This isn't the first activation you want to do, because the first activation of this is only going to lead you to a Fenrir or to a Unicorn. And if I go activate this, search out a Fenrir or a Unicorn, and my opponent goes draw, I'm not really going anywhere. Like, I don't want to go, cool, search out a Unicorn, reveal Unicorn, summon down the Regenesis Archfiend, because then the Regenesis Archfiend isn't going to search you anything either. So you're basically just sitting there with a defensive card that isn't going to do a lot for you. So unless I absolutely had to, I was prioritising the first search out of the Regenesis, and then after I've completed that search, whether I activated the Regenesis spell, whether I activated Archfiend, I would then go for Planet. I know it can be a little bit counterintuitive because you've already got a monster on that field, but the idea was I baited the first search for something that was more important, and if I don't get drolled, I then can go into a Planet Write-Off, which can obviously still increase all of my Regenesis cards, and that's probably where a Scareclaw Cash or a Tearlament Cash will probably come into a little bit more effectiveness to kind of add you that more field presence. For the hand traps, I was on triple Perulia. This actually worked out in my favour, and this was not so much an accident, but this was more so that my Fluoroses were in my White Forest deck and I forgot to pack them. So I stuck with the Perulias in the main deck, and it worked out in my favour because I ended up facing Yugioh, Blue Eyes, which this card is not better than, but if they don't respect it, you can actually get a decent amount of draws. So this would obviously be Fluoros, but it put in a bit of work for me. Free Effect Veiler, I'm actually considering cutting this down. It's currently a 42 card deck. I could see myself cutting the Veiler out completely and then bumping up 3 of another card, which I'll talk about in a second. Obviously, Veiler puts in work, and that was kind of scenario is, before getting to the event, I didn't know exactly what I was going to be facing. I don't really like Effect Veiler or Imperm against Blue Eyes decks as much, because it's like, okay, technically I could stop the Primite, but then they still go into the Link 1. The Link 1 still moves their plays forward. I could stop Sage. I could stop the Link 1, but they can still get plays going. So it doesn't really end their turns, which is why I felt, I'm just going to skip ahead quickly, that I would much rather be playing Ghost Ogres and Ghost Spells. Now, Ogre's actually put in a lot of work for me today, but again, that's just because of the matchups I ended up facing. Like, against Blue Eyes, this card was insane. Against other matchups like Mitsurugis and Malices, this would have been much better. So which is why I went with a 2 and a 2, because again, I didn't know what I was going to be facing today. And it was only afterwards that I was kind of like where I'd cherry pick and adapt. So I could highly see myself cutting Effect Veiler down to 2 or cutting it out completely and going for like 3 Bell and 3 Ogre. But that's just something I still need to test around and play around with. But yeah, Ogre put in a lot of work for me. This was like the MVP against... this was the MVP against Blue Eyes in my final round. And then the Ghost Spell I never saw. Like the one time that I did see it, it wasn't very effective for me. I had to normal summon it to then work my way into a Synchro Monster, which you'll see in the extra deck, which is why these are in here, and these are a bit more prominent because they can also be normal summons to work you into 2 of your Synchro targets. Same with Ash Blossom, pretty standard on that one. Triple Imperm. And then a card that the more and more I think about it, because I bumped the deck to 42 right at the last minute, makes less and less sense, and that's Prosperity. There's no real reason for Prosperity. The only benefit is you don't care about your extra deck whatsoever. So it is one of them cards that if you see it, to look through the top 6 can actually be quite valuable for you. But it doesn't really serve its deck thing capability because you're on 42 cards. Like if you want a deck thing, you might as well just cut it down to 40. But yeah, your extra deck is so flexible, which is where most of the changes are going to come from it. There's a couple of cards I wanted to test out and try out this time round, but then I think there's a lot that I want to change. So the first 3 cards in here that are basically just going to be Ultimate Slayer targets is Elder Entity Unts, Malong, and then Garura. Now, I already naturally play a couple of links, and I already naturally play like some XYZs. Yes, of course, Agitator should be in here as well. I forgot to pack the Agitator. That's how prepared I was. But initially, as I turned up to the event, I was like, right, I'm going to try out Gordian Slicer. Now, this was just one of them ones I was like, well, right at the last minute, I was like, well, I think Ultimate Slayer is going to be better than Gordian Slicer. Like, Gordian Slicer could be risky. If this banished face up, happy days, but then it'd be too broken in Malice. So ultimately, right at the last minute, I took these out. I had these targets on me, so I swapped them straight out for Ultimate Slayers. Never saw, like, I did see Ultimate Slayer, but never got to use it. Obviously, it would have been great in a Yugioh matchup, would have been great in a Blue Eyes matchup. But honestly, Ultimate Slayer never came up. So these could very easily be super body targets. There are some other targets that I'm going to show you in a second that I want to take out, and these will be ultimately end up being cards like SP that I missed. I definitely should have had that in there. There is Harmonic Symphonizer, I believe it is, which is another rank 7, which could also be quite useful. And then the 3 spaces that I took out right at the last minute with some rank 8s, being the Galaxy Eyes Armor Monster number 90, Hope Harbinger, and Dingirsu, which I wish I had had in the main deck, because there was a couple of times where I was like, I'm not going to make rank 8s, I don't need to worry about that. And then there was a couple of times I was finding myself with 2 level 8s and 1 level 7s. I was like, damn, I could have made more rank 8s than I could 7s. I was on the Mecha Phantom Beast into 2 tokens, turn them both into Link Spider, into G Golem, into Heat Soul play. This was just because I had the flexibility in the extra deck, but honestly, this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of like spaces in the deck, 1/3 of your entire extra deck that you could take out. And there was a couple of times where I was like extra deck locking myself, but I kind of did like the idea of Heat Soul, and Heat Soul actually provided an OTK for me because I had the Planet Rice off, and I overlaid 2 of my Kashtiras into Draco Sack, Link Spiders, G Golem into Decode Heat Soul, which pointed to Draco Sack and Sage, and then drew a card off of this. Unfortunately, I drew a card that I was like, I haven't used my normal summon, so if I draw a card that I can normal summon, great. I actually ended up drawing a Draw Unlock Bear, which didn't help me. But because this was being had 2 monsters it was pointing to, it went up to 33, and then it had a wind, a water, a wind, fire, and a water, so they all went up another 300 attack each, which was quite helpful. So something to trial out. I'm not completely sold on it. It was just a kind of option because the extra deck was so flexible, but I think you very, very easily change that. The 2 synchros I was playing was the 1 Chengying and the 1 Jirachi. Now, the Chengying's pretty straightforward and simple on this one. Anytime a card is banished, you get to banish a card from your opponent's graveyard and their field. And obviously, for every card that is banished, like yours or your opponent's, this one goes up by 100. And so this card gains 100 attack and defense, and monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack and defense. So it's just a nice power swing. Never made this card. I really wanted to make this card. I just really like the card in general. So each time your opponent activates a card or effect, you gain 300 life points when it resolves. And then during your opponent's turn, you get a quick effect to pay 1500 life points and then tribute this card. Then activate one of these effects. Destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls, or destroy all face-up spells and traps your opponent controls. You can only use each effect once per turn. Now, this is quite equivalent to something like a Red Eyes Flare. Like, if you're able to sit on a Red Eyes Flare and a Cursed Thunder God, like, the life point switch would be absolutely disgusting because you're constantly going to keep burning your opponent every time they resolve, and then you're constantly going to be gaining life points every time they resolve, so you're just going to make the gap in life points bigger. But I never made this. For the other rank 7s, 1 Kashtira Shangri-La, never made it, to be honest. 1 Big Eye, made it once or twice, helped me in the Yubel matchup. 1 number 1 Infection Buzz King. This was the card that I left in, and I don't understand why I left this in, but I took out Hope Harbinger, SP Little Knight, like I didn't even consider, which was so stupid of me, Dingirsu and everything else. But the burn, the pop, and the look at the edge of it was actually really invaluable, but this would very easily be an SP Little Knight and be no issues. And then finally the 1 Typhon. So Typhon is Typhon. You can very easily play Zeus if you wanted to, but I kind of went on my extra deck being a little bit more flexible for cards like Slayers, for Gordian Slicers, maybe even Super Polys. Less so Super Poly for the pure fact that if I extra deck lock myself by activating the Regenesis code, which I think is an insanely good card, I didn't want to go into like make a misplay where I couldn't do it. So yeah. For the extra deck, again, side deck, a couple of last minute changes on this one, pretty standard on this. Triple Artifact Lancian and Triple Draw Lockbird, like the hand traps of the format right now. You can consider Nibiru. If you don't respect Nibiru, then more for you. One card that I played instead of Nibiru was Lava Golem. I contemplated siding it in once, and then I never put it back in. I was like, this is completely pointless putting this in. It's just one of the ones where, as you'll see in the main deck, you don't use your normal summon at all. Like, the only time you'll use your normal summon is if you go Birth and then normal summon your Fenrir, but that requires for a couple of different pieces to come into play. Another card that I've been considering for a normal summon, and ultimately went against it right at the last minute, as I drop cards all over the place, is Backup Ignista, and the reason for that is you would play the one Replicard Lad. Now, what I liked about this one is that this card itself, you get to banish one other level 7 or higher monster from your hand, special summon this card from the hand. You get to target a face-up monster you control and special summon a monster from the deck with a different name that has 2 or more of the same level, attack, and or defense, but it cannot activate its effects this turn. So this was purely from the sneak peek event. I was lucky enough to pull a Backup Ignista at the sneak peek event and one of the lads. And the idea behind this one is that you would go, cool, normal summon backup to get you access to this. The biggest downside is you do need to discard a card, and then with lad you need to banish a card. So you'd probably much rather hard open up the lad than anything else. But the way that this would work is you'd banish another level 7, which straight away set up your graveyard effect to your Regenesis code. You'd then summon this down. You could then target itself and then summon out any of your Regenesis monsters, because your Regenesis monsters weren't dark, they were level 7, so, well, I say any Regenesis monster apart from Dragon. But even with Dragon, it still matches attack and or defense. So you could still be able to get access to certain cards as well. It's something I wanted to try it out, I never did. So ultimately my normal summon wasn't being used, so I decided to go with Lava Golem. Long story short, technically. 2 Ultimate Slayers, this should have been free. Like, I would cut out the Lava Golems now and play 3 Ultimate Slayers. 2 Lightning Storms, put in a lot of work for me. 1 Duster, pretty standard. And the last card that I never put in was Dragon's Mind. And the reason I never put this in is, without being big-headed, I didn't lose a game. Like, I would, whether I won the dice roll or not, because people didn't, know exactly what Regenesis were doing and didn't understand like how aggressive Regenesis could be, I was able to pretty much pick a field apart, and then if I lost the dice roll, take control of that game. And then game 2, they would always go first, and that's where I could side in my field breakers, so like Lightning Storms. I'd already been main decking Perulias, Ultimate Slayers, you name it. So I'd then be able to pick a field apart and then pushing for an OTK. So obviously, in a game where I lose and I'm going first, I'm going to be putting in Dragon's Mind. I just like the fact that when a spell trap or monster effect is activated, while you control a monster with 2500 original attack or defense, which both your cash engine can facilitate and your Regenesis, you get to negate the activation, destroy it, and if this is in the graveyard, you pay 2500 life points to reset it, but you banish it when it leaves the field. So it's just a recyclable counter trap in theory. So that is pretty much it for the entire profile. There's a couple of bits I would change, more so like I've mentioned in the extra deck. I am tempted to trial out some of the other Kashtira cards just to kind of see how effective they will be and whether or not I prefer to kind of lean into not so much what they're going to add, because like I've said, Unicorn is the best bridge, because Unicorn is the card that lets you get access to your Archfiend, while also being a monster with 2500 attack to get you access to your Sage and everything else in between. But the idea of getting access to another cash monster could be quite useful, especially if I'm playing Theosis. Like if I hard open up the Theosis, that can be quite useful. And then Millinson cards can also be quite useful as well to set you up some graveyard effects of maybe Regenesis or Sage or anything else in between. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. I really do enjoy this deck. I don't think it's going to be like a meta toppler, but I do think it's a really kind of cool deck to play around with. And if you could pick up the Regenesis cards relatively cheap, like I think Sage I paid like £1.50 for. I paid like £1 on Lord. Archfiend was probably the most expensive alongside Regenesis, but again, some of them are dropping down in price, so like 10 to £15 a copy. You might be able to pick up an entire core for like 70 quid. I think it's kind of fun and worth it, and it might even drop even further. But it's just something to look into. If you do like playing decks with 2500, you can mess around with those and find different variants. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.